All right, so here we go. I sped this up a little bit. This is about 2 times speed, um, and we're just gonna start with a quick study of Yoda. I've never drawn him before, so I thought instead of just practicing and then shooting a video, why not shoot a video of me practicing? So this is that. This is just in my sketchbook, using just a mechanical pencil, and you can see that I start with just a rough shape. Get like the circle over the head and figure out the proportion of the ears and then I'm trying to figure out where the ears line up with the eyes, and then how high his forehead is above those ears. Um, when you're drawing anything, I'm looking at some photos here. I found 2 or 3 photos just to use as reference. And what you want to do is you just want to find landmarks. Like look at where does the top of the eye, where does that line up with the ear, and then with Baby Yoda, the top of his eye is just a little bit below the top of his ear. And so you just look for little guides like that to figure it out. With the human face, you kind of learn the proportions and you can sort of draw those. But with something like this, the proportions are really critical. Like his eyes are real big, and then he's got big cheeks, and then a tiny chin, and then a little neck. So I'm just trying to figure it out here. So I think I got close enough. This one's all right. You'll see. And then I went in with I have these brush pens I use. These are Japanese brush pens. If you go to jetpens.com, you can order these. They come with ink inside already, and then they have a nice fine tip. And then I have these other little brush pens I use too. But jetpens.com. And then the important thing you want to do is always use waterproof ink. So I know that this pen and then the other one I was using, that brush pen, they're all waterproof, because if you're going to do watercolor over the top of it, you don't want to use ink that's not waterproof. It'll just ruin the whole drawing. Again, I'm just doing a real quick sketch here just to sort of figure it out, and I think I made him a little bit too old. I messed up his mouth a little bit. And then I'm using a kneaded eraser here to erase all the pencil lines and just reveal the ink. And again, I go in, it's all a process. So rough pencils, then tighten up the pencils, and then go in with ink, fill in some of the darker areas, add some shadows. You can add depth to your drawing with thicker lines. So I'm going over those thin lines now and just trying to find the drawing. It's especially the first time you're drawing something you don't really know how to do it. You're just sort of figuring it out on the page as you go. So that's what this is, just a quick study. And it's fun. I love the brush pen because you can get that thin and thick and then add some shadows and a little texture to his little sack that he wears. And then this one's alright. But again, when you're drawing something for the first time, you want to kind of just figure it out. And this is sort of a wax pencil I use. It's black. And then I go over this. This is a fun way to add sort of shading to your drawing. It doesn't really go with watercolor. I'm not going to paint this one. This is just black and white. But it's cleaner than charcoal because it's a waxier material. But you can use a crayon too. They work in a similar way. This just kind of lasts longer. Doesn't get as dull as the crayons do. But it's a fun way to add some shading to an ink drawing, give it some texture. Then finally, the little white highlights on his eyes that make him look sort of glossy. That's the final step. Make him look like he's alive. And it's alright. Alright, so now I've sort of figured out the proportions, so I'm using that what I learned in that drawing to apply to his ears and how they relate to his head and his body here. So we're going to do and again, look how I'm holding the pencil. This is something they taught us in school like a long time ago. Is don't hold the pencil like when you're writing. It's going to make you tighten up, and you're going to start focusing on details. What you want to do is just hold it loosely in your hand. You don't want a death grip on that pencil, and just sort of use your wrist, use your whole arm and your wrist to draw with. It'll give your drawing a little more life. And then go in when it's time for detail. Then hold it like when you're writing. You want to hold it a little bit more with a little more control. And look, I'm using the edge of the pencil too, not the tip. And I'm drawing very lightly because right now I'm just trying to figure out proportion. Where is it going to be on the page? The worst thing you could do is start drawing and then you don't have enough room at the bottom of the page, and so you have to squeeze it in. And then you're tempted to make the bottom of it smaller to fit on the page. So this way you don't have any surprises. You know where everything's going to be already. and then it's just a matter of filling it in. And again, finding the ear shape, um, and then again, looking for those landmarks again, where where the eyes are in relation to the ears. The trick with drawing anything when you're observing it is to see where it is in relationship to the things around it. And that'll help you with proportion. It's really, it's just training your eye, really. Like, I feel like when I'm drawing anything, you don't really ever see anything until you've drawn it. And then when you look at it, it just forces your eye to study every little bit of it and how it relates to every other little piece around it. So to me, it's valuable to draw from other people's drawings. And here I'm showing my pencil. It's a 9H. It's kind of a harder lead, so it leaves a lighter line. The softer pencils, they leave a darker line, and I'm going to end up erasing all this anyway, so I didn't want it too dark to begin with, because then it's harder to erase. But with that kneaded eraser, that's an easy way to like sort of lift up pencil lines without too much trouble, especially after inking. It won't mess up your ink. So now that I have the rough drawing in with that pencil, I'm going in adding detail and defining exactly where these lines are going to be. Figuring out where his chin is and the shape of his eyes. But now you can see I've got that underdrawing, so I'm not just making it up. There's nothing really risky going on here. I figured out the proportions and just adding the details. Again, I'm drawing this knowing that I'm going to be painting it too, so I don't have to put too many lines in. I just have to know where the shapes are and where the shadows are going to be and sort of define those. Because I'm going to do a little bit of ink, but not too much on this. And again, you don't want to have a death grip on that pencil. Just keep it loose. Keep your lines flowing. You don't want to kill the lines that you're drawing. You want to have some life to it. So again, you see, I don't really hold my pencil like I do there. I'm erasing his mouth because I got it all wrong. It was too long and too not cute enough. You'll see me try this a couple times probably. It was hard to get it right. And then you got to be careful with his eyes. If you do it wrong, he looks angry. Erase that. Yeah, erase that. You gotta get that angle just right, or he looks kind of angry instead of sad and cute. What I learned about drawing Baby Yoda was it's tough to make him look cute. He ends up looking old and angry if you don't do it right. I think it ended up okay, but I could probably do with another practice session. The sack is pretty easy. That part was fun. And again, you just want to suggest some of the wrinkles and everything. And put his hands in there. We're going to do a lot of shading and defining of the shapes with the paint when we're done. So really, we just need to make sure the outlines and the shapes are right. I'm not going to use pencil or ink really to add shade or depth to anything. And he kind of has this one long wrinkle across his whole front brow. You can see it closer there. Still a little messy. I find that if I define and here's the microns. These are what I use. There's a 0.1 that's a little too thin. The 0.5 I think is just right. It gives you like a regular line, very even. And again, I'm just going over like the main lines, the outlines really, just to define the shapes. It's not going to have any depth yet, for sure. But it's just a little bit of a guide, so when I'm painting, I have something to look at, and this is a style I've sort of developed over the years with just a thin line and then the paint over the top, so you get a little bit of drawing and a little bit of painting. And I don't enjoy painting photorealistically. I feel like I like to see the hand of the artist. I want to see what went into the making of it, and I think when you do photoreal, you sort of lose that. It sort of becomes dead on the page. And again, just being real careful here. When I'm inking completely wrong, you shouldn't do it. You should always ink like top to bottom, left to right if you're right-handed, or top to bottom, right to left if you're left-handed. So you're not dragging your hand across wet ink as you're drawing. But I'm being real careful, and this pen dries pretty quickly. And you can see I hold the pen a little more like when I'm writing. You want to have a little more control over it here, but you don't want to. Again, you don't want a death grip. You want the lines to be kind of loose. At least I do. I like sort of a looser, wavier line that gives it a little more personality. But you'll find when you're drawing, ultimately your art is going to be like your handwriting. Everybody's is a little bit different, and your style is really what is your handwriting. It's seeing the hand of the artist in it. And here I am. I'm using the kneaded eraser to just pick up those pencil lines. It does a really good job. It doesn't smear the ink. Some of the other erasers can pull the ink off the page. The kneaded eraser doesn't. You can get those at any art supply place. And they're great. They last a long time. Alright, so I let the ink dry, and then I got my coffee. Coffee is always on the left if you're right-handed, and water's on the right, so that you are less tempted to accidentally dip your brush into your coffee. And I use these little square cakes of paint. I've been using the same tin of paint for years, and you can just refill it from tube or buy new little squares. The first step is layering. So it's always about layering everything. Like you're doing rough pencils and then inks over the top. And then with paints the same way. I'm doing like a thin layer of yellow that's just going to go over everything. I'll leave some white for his face, the focal point of the painting. So white will be the brightest thing. So I try to leave a little bit of that so his face will pop a little more. And you let that white from the paper do some of the work. And then you go over the top. And then ultimately the white is only going to be on like edges and like little bit of highlight here or there as you build up the color. And again, you want to think about what's the final product going to be. What is the final color? Like he's a lot of greens and browns and everything, so it's pretty safe to use yellow. And then using some darker colors around the outside just to make him pop off the page, and sort of leaving the edge. You can see on the bottom left I'm leaving that white and that yellow edge between the black background. And again on his head and above his ears and this background too, I'm leaving a little bit of an edge between that color and then the color of his ears and his face. Then you'll see a few cuts as I let it dry. You definitely have to let this dry if you're going to layer like this with watercolor. So it takes a little bit of patience. Go get some more coffee. And then again, so now I'm starting to layer just basic like greens, some greens, a little bit of yellow. You don't put the color that he is down right away. You kind of build up to it, so you kind of know that it's going to be green, but a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue in there. You sort of slowly work your way towards that final color. And this little sack, now I'm adding some brown. And again, I'm working in sections, so I gotta let the green of his skin dry so I can work on his little sack that he wears. And then while that's drying, I can go back to other spots. Now I'm doing his eyes. They're not solid black, but this painting was so small that I kind of got away with it. But just doing that, just sort of kill time so the other stuff can dry. And I almost put my brush in the coffee. I did not this time. Again, mix the colors and sort of, I'm slowly building up that green. You can see I'm slowly getting my way to that color. And then how you put the paint down, you saw how I did that all in one kind of stroke. You don't want to dab it on there. You want to just kind of have some confidence, push the paint around on there, and then it won't be patchy. You don't want it to look like little patchy spots of color. Letting it dry, and you can see how it dries around his face. It leaves like a little edge. That that's what gives you sort of the shadows and the definition. I didn't have to do it with pen and brush and ink. You can sort of suggest the shapes now with the paint. Now I'm going in with some like dark browns and blacks to sort of define the folds of his clothes here. Again, just doing it in layers, letting his skin dry, working on the sack part, and then the background of kind of sort of waiting, adding a little bit as I go. And what I try to do is also use similar colors across the entire painting. So if I'm doing blacks and blues, I try to do them all over universally, so I'm not getting a different black or blue later on if I have to remix a color. And you can see now I'm doing actually blue and a little bit of black to add shadow to his face. It's not just straight black. No shadow is ever just solid black. There's always other colors in it. Colors of what the shadow's on, and then and I find that like adding a little bit of blue to it sort of gives it some life. And so now I'm adding little wrinkles to his head and his eyeballs and his little eyelids. The key is you gotta make him look a little sad, a little worried, but not old and angry. That's the trick. And now I'm going in. You can see how his hands and they sort of all blend in with the sack right now, and so I'm going in there and sort of defining that. I want his hands to pop out a little more, so you make his clothes behind there a little darker, so his hands pop out. And you can see I'm letting those lighter colors now come forward by adding the darker colors around it, so his hands are a little lighter. There we go, finished product.